Ender Lilies Quietus of the Night is a dark fantasy Metroidvania game where you fight bosses to collect their spirits, unlocking new abilities and areas in the game, while uncovering more about the world and your place in it. I'm just gonna say it right out of the gate. Ender Lilies is similar in a lot of ways to Hollow Knight. I'd be dishonest to not acknowledge their similarities. I'm not saying this to discredit the publishers or developers of the game. I genuinely enjoyed the game all the way through and believe that the product stands out on its own, despite how often it can be compared to its 4-year-older counterpart. Hollow Knight is a monument of well-designed Metroidvania Souls-like, and while not entirely Soul-like, Ender Lilies does a lot of things as well as Hollow Knight in its genre's department, so understandably there's comparison to be had. Also, in my defense, Silksong isn't out yet, and I wanted to get a Hollow Knight-esque fix, and if anyone else is in the same boat, this video can serve as a good reason to grab Ender Lilies because, spoiler, I genuinely don't have many negative things to say about the game. It's also a shorter experience, so if you're like some of my friends who didn't get the chance to get into Hollow Knight, this game may be a decent option for you. But before we get into it, like, subscribe, and do whatever else you want to help the video or the channel, and thank you for watching. What makes Ender Lilies stand out, in my opinion, is its gameplay and combat systems. Ender Lilies combat works off of a spirit or summon system, which means that your abilities and attacks are tied to unlocks earned through defeating mini and normal bosses alike. It's like if Pokemon were an action game. No, not like Power World. Some other examples of this system are PS3's Folklore and vaguely Final Fantasy XVI. As cool of a gameplay concept as I think it is, not many games do what Ender Lilies does. The previous examples were all I could think of, and honestly, if you guys know of more games, let me know because I feel like the summon system has not been as widespread in games as it should. I just love the concept. But anyway, before I explain spirits any further, I need to actually talk about how combat plays and additional elements of the gameplay, just to clearly represent why the spirit system works with the game designed as it is. Like your typical Metroidvania, enemies' attacks have a wind-up animation, and in Ender Lilies' case, show an indicator when they are going to attack. This makes the game significantly easier, as you'll pretty much never have to worry about completely mistiming a dodge or parry. The difficulty in this game is in between just right and slightly too easy, in my opinion. It's decently approachable. There is, however, no difficulty settings until you beat the game, and most of those settings just make the game more difficult anyway. The game does not have a soul or money system like the Souls games or Hollow Knight, but instead you level up based on XP you gain from defeating enemies and bosses. XP is not lost on death and isn't really a threat in the game, so the game allows you to teleport back to your last respite using the menu. This can be done almost at all times. There is also currency found throughout the map that you can use to upgrade spirits, which is also not lost on death. Ender Lilies uses a decently common mechanic in gaming known as stagger. The game doesn't waste your time explaining stagger as it's never explicitly tutorialized. Stagger is obvious in function and use almost immediately. Each enemy has a bar below its health. Hitting an enemy with any spirit will decrease its bar. Upon the bar reaching 0, the enemy will be staggered, causing it to fall over, stop its attack, and be open to more damage. Enemies and bosses all have different stagger values, and stagger has varying effectiveness for different enemies. For some, it's a death sentence, others half a second of respite, and for bosses, it's a great opportunity to get in free damage, especially when you use an SP gauge. After defeating one of the main bosses, you unlock the SP gauge. The SP gauge works with one of your main spirits to produce a stronger attack. During a boss fight, the SP gauge can be a great way of getting in free damage or progressing the boss's stagger. While exploring and fighting mini-bosses, using the SP gauge can guarantee safety, especially with the iframes it gives when used. On a brief note, the game's iframes are fairly generous, but when recovering from something that activates iframes, you may be more open to damage, which may or may not be a skill issue on my behalf. Either way, the base combat mechanics are satisfying and fit well into how the game is designed. Now back to the spirit system, because I have not really done that part justice. Ender Lilies' implementation of spirits is well done. It's intuitive, customizable, and encourages variance. The game has 26 unique spirits, 3 of which can be equipped at a time per set. You have 2 sets. These sets are honestly important to the whole system, as they enable experimentation and allow players to step out of their comfort zone of always using the same spirits. Tornado, my beloved. Having two sets that the player can switch out whenever is a massive win. You can have a set that's just built for staggering an enemy, a set that's built for exploration, a set built for raw damage, a set for indirect and ranged attacks, and even a set for different stages of a boss. With the large variety of spirits, there's plenty of options. Most spirits have a specific number of uses, but the number is just right. You can run out of uses for these spirits, but you aren't likely to. There's actually a no main spirit speedrun category which disallows the use of any spirit that has infinite uses. Throughout your playthrough, you can upgrade your favorite spirits up to level 6 with the currency unlocked through exploration. The game also scales the levels of later unlocked spirits, so you aren't as punished for upgrading more early game spirits. Although personally I might recommend against it due to the game's variety in spirits. I used, practically may I add, 20 out of the 26 spirits. I probably would have used way less if I couldn't effectively test out new spirits in generic combat or just running around. The 6 spirits I didn't use were because of my playstyle preferences, but probably have niche uses where they can be used effectively. I just didn't like them or see their use in my sets. Their attacks were either too unreliable, slow, or straight up left me exposed. This is not a complete downside to the game though. These spirits may cater to a different playstyle, or might be useful for challenge runs. Variety is rarely a bad thing. On the note of variety, the game features an assortment of relics, 34 to be exact. Relics can be equipped to allow for a more focused build. Throughout the map, you can find chains of sorcery, which are essentially relic slots that will allow you to expand your build. Relics don't make a massive difference in gameplay, but can help make you tankier, heal more effectively, move more efficiently, deal more damage, take less damage, and so on. I would not be doing any Metroidvania justice if I didn't make exploration its own section, or at very least talk about it. Exploration in this game is fun and semi-intuitive. Y'all know Resident Evil? Well, Ender Lilies uses a key feature seen in the Resident Evil series, a map. A map that automatically changes color based on if the room is full cleared or not. When you have picked up every limited item in a screen, that area will change from blue to orange on the map. This feature helped me 100% the game and collect everything I needed to get stronger and beat the game without wasting too much time. One small issue I found when clearing rooms was that sometimes drops will be locked to spawn in a barrel and require you to link your way through the land, destroying pots and barrels as you see fit. Also, when I was cleaning up the map, some rooms took longer than they needed to due to me not finding the items in pots for a full clear. This was a decision they made, and while I appreciate the effort, I don't think it fits super well into the exploration of this game. Movement is fine in its simplest form, but over time playing the game, you'll acquire more abilities and methodologies to move throughout the map. Typical Metroidvania stuff. You'll get a wall climb, double jump, the ability to swim. Oh my god, there's a grapple hook in the game? A dash, a ground pound, and you can use a relic that lets you parry. There's nothing super innovative or fun about the movement per se, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I'm not even complaining. It's just typical Metroidvania movement-based unlocks. And there's a grappling hook. Completing an area boss doesn't straight up unlock a new area most of the time. It just unlocks the ability to traverse to new areas with your newly obtained insert reward here. Each area has its own personality and charm. The background and atmosphere is consistent for each area, and the developers did a great job in this regard. All of the areas have their own vibe and tone. We got the village, catacombs, castle, the shiny mushroom cave, a tundra, prison quarters, gas hell, and, the dark descent? Now, I had a couple hurdles that just made me feel dumb when exploring, and let's just say you can use my experience to skip that feeling. As I said earlier, exploration is semi-intuitive. As I was playing through the game, there was a couple instances where my progress just hit a wall. I thought I explored everything I could and was missing something small. Well, I was right. Although it's never guideposted, in the shiny mushroom area, there's these metal doors that don't have any levers or anything around them on the map with the activation button. I was enough of a buffoon to never realize on my own, and embarrassingly looked it up. But the bright lights near these doors were breakable, which, as you might guess, opened them. Don't worry, I was disappointed in myself too. Especially as someone who dislikes the yellow paint on everything in more recent Resident Evil games. That aside, there was one more part that stuck out to me as poorly communicated in terms of exploration. Gas hell. So near the end of the game, you enter an area with poison gas. The tick damage isn't insignificant either. To progress, you'll have to face tank the gas. But through basic game design communication, you're not incentivized in the slightest to jump headfirst into toxic gas. Text logs you'll pass before the area won't even allude to fighting through the gas, and if anything, mention a mask. So naturally, I looked elsewhere for the mask instead of braving the gas to reach it. A simple miscommunication of the game made me waste a little time. But at least this time I didn't feel stupid, because the game seemingly just lied to my face about the gas mask anyway. I don't know, it might be a skill issue, but what's done is done. It's all gas under the elevator now. Although it's not a feature that really belongs in Metroidvanias, I feel like the game could have benefited from a way of marking the map for points of interest. I found that before I unlocked various abilities like swimming, wall climbs, or double jumps, I found places that would be reachable if I had the necessary tools. Having a way to mark the map for this in-game would be nice. But I could see how this is a hot take that ruins discovery and the potential reward of backtracking, but it could be an interesting option. This also would have saved my time when I forgot where a newly accessible area was. Either way, moving throughout the map isn't that bad. You can always fast travel back to a respite, and from there move to another respite at nearly a moment's notice. Oh, and when I say moment's notice, I mean it. The game lets you escape danger, because, let's be honest, with no soul system, or real reason to need to live in this game, why not just let the player quickly get back to a rest point and explore as much as they can without being held back by traversing the same screens over and over again. Some may find the fast travel tedious, but honestly I think it works really well. The map isn't massive, but there are enough areas, and they all differ enough to keep the game interesting. I finished the game in under 20 hours and stayed entertained all the way through, even with temporarily getting stuck. If you took too long to get invested into Hollow Knight, Ender Lilies might be more your pace. Ender Lilies is a desolate game. There's no NPCs, and the only real dialogue you get is from one of your spirits, and maybe a line after you defeat some bosses. The only other explicit communication in the world is from text entries scattered around the map. There's no townsfolk. Everyone's been wiped out by the blight, and the overall feeling is a dreadful loneliness. The world that Ender Lilies takes place in is a remnant of the old world, and the only other thing living in it other than you isn't really living. Everybody in every area is either dead or has succumbed to the blight, and is just an agitated and decayed imitation of their past self. The closest thing you'll see to normal living people are dead clones of yourself that are scattered about the map, holding items that increase heal potency when picked up. As you're progressing through the story, your spirit, who does basically all of the talking in this game, might comment on these bodies and raise some questions which might all be vaguely answered over time. Every enemy that is converted into a spirit is cleansed and given their final rest from the blight after you beat them. Every other enemy is just unlucky and trapped in an eternal cycle of torment, hence them respawning every time you set at a respite. Or at least that makes sense to me. Every area in this forgotten wasteland tells a story, or at least makes me think about life before the blight. Although there's no NPCs, the areas feel lived in, both before the blight and as you're playing. Even though the areas are all infected and dilapidated, the game still manages to build an atmosphere with hints of hope. As I was progressing through the game, I felt the need to push on because there was an important in-game goal: to be the one to prevent the infection from spreading, to be the one to cure people of the past, or at least set them free of their eternal blight-driven torment. Which brings me to the story. Ender Lilies' story is told in a non-linear, discovery-based fashion. The story and lore is never overtly told to you, and you must piece it together by yourself when collecting text logs and journeying throughout the map. There's occasional cutscenes that you'll get after defeating area bosses, but that's explicit as it gets. Full transparency, I mostly played the game for the gameplay, and not for the story, meaning I didn't fully pay attention. There are other videos that can tell you the story far better than I could, and I'll link 2 of the videos below, one that does it quickly, and another that's a lot more in-depth. That aside, I will try my best, whatever that means. Upon waking from a slumber, a spirit known as the Umbral Knight speaks to you, Lily, asking if you have any recollection of the world, and basically tells you how it's his job to serve as a guide. As you make your way further into the land, you run into your first boss, Guardian Sigrid, who loosely hints at protecting you by destroying anything unknown. Upon killing the Guardian, she reveals that she was supposed to protect us, and we see a memory that gives us some info about the world and someone called the Priestess of the Fount, the only hope against the Blight. It was the priestess's duty to purify the Blight from the land, and doing so cost her her own well-being. Sigrid, the boss we just purified, said she saw the priestess in us, and that's why she was on guard where she was. The Guardian's last words tell us of a reign of death that probably put us where we are now in the world. After some time passes, of course. Upon the cutscene wrapping up, we unlock the spirit's abilities and learn how to double jump. The Umbral Knight says that the soul was purified and is no longer imprisoned by Blight. He tells us that we can learn more about the past through these memories from the main bosses. And he's right. A lot of the overt world building comes from these memories, and to save time, I'm just gonna cover the basics from here on out. Each new area boss reveals their purpose in the old world, as it's about to fully succumb to the Blight. A lot of the bosses are guards tasked with protecting royalty or the White Priestess, who was hinted at in the first memory. Throughout the game, we slowly find out that we are a clone/child of the White Priestess, hence the bodies being found throughout the map, and that, similar to the Priestess, we are tasked with curing the land of the Blight. However, after each boss cleansed, we retain some Blight infection, which shows on our character model. Now you might be wondering where the White Priestess is. Well, when we make our way down through the gas into the final area, we find her, barely holding on to her humanity, while using all of her energy to contain the Blight as a hollow vessel, if you will. So, similar to Ender Lilies' spiritual predecessor, the game has multiple endings, 3 to be exact, and they each come with their own cutscenes and splash screen. Just to sequence break real quick, Ending A can happen directly after defeating the boss that gives you the grapple ability. This ending vaguely serves as a coward's way out, and is abrupt in the fact that you, Lily, just gives up and the Umbral Knight supposedly goes to end the threat of the Blight on his own. I ran into this ending directly after rebooting the game, and the sudden end caught me off guard. I started laughing, probably not the game's intent, but I don't know, it was funny. I just boot the game, and 2 minutes later I get the ending. I was surprised, but not disappointed. Ending B occurs when you defeat and cleanse the White Priestess of her Blight, which in turn frees her from her torment, but you take her place. Ending C is the true ending, and the only one that fully stops the Blight, or so I think. It's acquired after Lily obtains a relic that, quote, lessens the suffering caused by the Blight during the purification ritual. This relic, the Aegis Curio, is obtained when you find multiple pieces of a tablet to unlock and activate it from the spawn room. So yeah, that's the story as quick and concise as I could make it. It was alright. I liked how each ending was different and had its own impact on both the world and me as a player. Both endings A and B kept me wanting more, which encouraged me to go for the true ending. Also, my completionist brain wouldn't let me stop, especially having known there was 3 endings. That's all to say my favorite ending was clearly C, especially with the 2-stage final fight. This ending makes it clear that the story is not only a story of despair, but also a story of hope. When trying for ending C, I didn't even need a guide to collect any of the tablets, and also the game did a good enough job to communicate how I could get the ending. The stone tablets being unlocked primarily through a recently acquired door opening ability made getting the third ending a lot more feasible when playing guideless. Not just this, but the endgame text entries talking about the tablet's purpose, and tablet slots being tracked in the main menu, also made getting ending C easier on my gameplay giddy mind. I may have had to look through the text again to be sure about the tablets, but it was easy to understand and not really convoluted like another dark fantasy Metroidvania. Then again, I could have just been genuinely unaware when I played through the other game, or just been too reliant on guides back then whenever I hit any inconvenience. Back to Ender Lilies. I liked the story as much as it was a minor thing for my individual experience. The reason to be doing what I was doing in the world was enough for me. I'm not really a big story or lore guy in general, and this game did not change that for me. But I still enjoyed the story. It wasn't groundbreaking, and variations of it have been done before, but it was enjoyable, and I'm at least curious about where they plan on going with the next game, which I have yet to mention, mostly because I have nothing to say about a game I haven't played. It takes place in the future, and it looks like there's more spirit slots. It's in early access right now, and, well, that's all I have to say. Ender Lilies has plenty to offer. As I mentioned before, it's a game I 100%ed, and it's one of the ones I can recommend to people without my hobby of 100%ing games. The map lets you spot rooms that aren't fully cleared, and using a guide for collectibles isn't really necessary when you use all of the tools at your disposal. If trophies, achievements, and the like don't drive you to keep playing a game, then New Game Plus, Boss Rush, challenge runs, and accessibly replayable boss fights might encourage replayability for you. The game has a lot more than expected to offer in terms of post-game content. There are speedruns which can vary from sub 20 minutes to around 2 hours. There's currently not too many entries, so if you're willing to put in the time, you may find a good speed game for yourself. There's a New Game Plus mode that you unlock after beating Ending C. This sets enemy health and damage values to higher, and presumably you can loop several times, making a New Game Plus 10 or more file if you ever wanted to. New Game Plus also enables custom settings like damage percents, available spirits at one time, level limitations, and everybody's favorite, instant death. You can also change or remove contact damage, this being the only adjustment to potentially make the game easier. You can even use new game modifiers on a straight up new game file, making a new game minus run if you really wanted to. New Game Plus was not in the game on launch, and actually came out 2 months after the 1.0 release. The same with Boss Rush, or Maligned Memories as the game calls it. This mode tasks you with defeating all of the main bosses in their story order as quickly as possible. Spirit uses and heals are tracked in between boss fights, so you may need to stay wary and not waste everything on one boss. You will get spirit uses and a heal back, but it's still something to keep in mind. I have yet to beat the mode, but it's fun, and I spent some time with it after thinking I was done with the game entirely. It was fun messing with builds and melting through the first few bosses in this mode. Added in the same update, and this time not requiring game completion, you have the option to refight any main boss alone when selecting Purified Memories. Having an option to retry fights at a moment's notice is always a positive for me. Say you want to refight a hard boss on a whim, or just dominate an early boss with a new build. Purified Memories gives you that option, and just a little more replayability even before you finish the game. Spoiler for this section, the game looks and sounds good. As I said a few times in earlier sections, the environmental design is very well done. The atmosphere of the game is desolate but hopeful. The game is dark yet bright. Even though the areas are full of death, they're just so lively. Movement of the blighted spirits working for you and against you flows together well, and most damaging abilities can be predicted easily, especially with enemy strike indicators. All animations in the game flow well together, and while playing through, no attack looked oddly animated or too unfair to dodge or parry. The backgrounds and level design are, again, really well done. Each area feels different and once lively. I've already said my piece a bit ago on that, but never mentioned the music. Well, it only complements the visuals. Everything communicated from the visuals is communicated through the music and sound design as well. They both complement each other. The village has a lost charm to it. The mushroom area's tone is whimsical and bright in a way that just works. Some boss themes are both melancholy and intense somehow, and the final area looks and feels like a beating heart, the core of the blight and where it's all trying to be contained. The game has a phenomenal art design, sound design, and soundtrack. Apparently the soundtrack artist is a highly regarded group, and I can see why. They even worked on the Ghost in the Shell anime. With the music being so good, I have a nitpick-sized complaint. When you defeat a boss, the music stops, for a little too long and consistently throughout the game. I understand that cutting sound and music and giving the player complete silence can be a useful tool, but here it either seems lazy or like the developers were trying too hard. Insane nitpick, I know, but seeing my game sound on OBS drop to 0 for 10 plus seconds after defeating every area boss kind of got to me to an admittedly stupid extent. Again, the music and sound design was really well done. The drawn-out silence just took a little too much away from my immersion. Now, I tried to not reference Hollow Knight that much when talking about everything so far, but there's some obvious comparisons and contrasts, like I made earlier. Starting off with some contrasts. Despite the theme and story being similar in various ways, both games have their own art style. Sure, a lot of things I said about Ender Lilies' soundtrack and atmosphere could be said about Hollow Knight, but their styles are noticeably different, and they both fit their own games really well. I genuinely like the art style of both games. In terms of game elements, fast travel, area-based unlocks, respite benches for changing builds, and map movement are all shared. To be fair, those are mostly genre elements. However, relics are a lot different to Ender Lilies' credit. Almost every relic in Ender Lilies is exclusively passive, while memorable relics from Hollow Knight are known to have synergies that affect combat and build variety. Ender Lilies does not need an advanced relic system because most of the game's build potential comes from spirit sets. Metroidvania unlocks from Hollow Knight are amplified by relics and a majority of combat, while Ender Lilies meta unlocks don't affect combat as much. Think about how many spells you always have access to in Hollow Knight, and how each of these unlocks can have value in pretty much every fight. Ender Lilies' spirit system makes the game stand out by itself, and every time you fight a boss you could use a different combination of sets. Both options work for the games that they're in. Hollow Knight utilizes its build customizability in relics, while Ender Lilies' variety is a lot more surface level, and to me, a bit more enjoyable. In Hollow Knight, the world changes as infection seeps through it. In Ender Lilies, your character model changes as you cleanse more blight, but the environment is stagnant. In terms of difficulty, Ender Lilies does not have a soul system, and you aren't punished for dying. The ability to change your build completely before a fight also alleviates some difficulty. Anyway, I think there's enough of a difference in gameplay approach that makes these games not too overtly similar. Story and world building elements, however, have a lot more overlap between these games. Both games follow you, a clone of sorts, in a world ravaged by infection, changing living beings around it. The lowest area and final boss are thematically really close. The fact that there's an alternate boss stage that opens into an alternate ending, and equipping a relic is required to trigger said stage is very similar. The fact that the boss is in some way a version of the playable character is one thing, but to have both be a vessel tasked with containing the infection of the land by royalty is a little off. Homework was definitely copied here. Hollow Knight is a great game. Ender Lilies is a great game in its own right as well. Nothing really tops Hollow Knight in terms of Metroidvanias, but Ender Lilies as a game still stands out and can be a great fix for one's Metroidvania craving. I know I enjoyed my time with it. So, should you get and play through Ender Lilies? And why is the answer yes? Well, it's a relatively short experience. It isn't too difficult while maintaining a decent balance offered by other Metroidvanias in terms of difficulty. The moment-to-moment gameplay is fun, engaging, and makes use of a decently unique mechanic that I've rarely seen in games. Combat has variety, and the game is set up in a way that encourages said variety. Exploration may sometimes hit a wall if you're using a guideless approach, but is still rewarding, especially with cleared rooms marked on the map, like other games I won't stop mentioning on the channel. The art style and direction of the game is really well done. If you like the music in this video, you'll like the Ender Lilies soundtrack because, well, that's what's been playing. While there are comparisons to Hollow Knight in mostly the game's story and lore, the story is well told in a mostly environmental way. Even though this type of world building may be a downside to some, I found its execution well done. I view all of the core components of this game positively. Sure, the game has some hiccups in areas, but my overall experience with the game was very positive. I have always been interested in a spirit system or summon system, and once I heard this game had one, I wanted it. And for one last time, I think it was money well spent. Ender Lilies is a unique game that can work effectively as a game to play if you need a Hollow Knight fix while you're waiting for Silksong, however long that might take. It's also a shorter game, and you might be able to use that to get your friends to experience something Hollow Knight adjacent if they never stuck with that game in the first place. Now, what does Ender Lilies do better than Hollow Knight? Well, it has a sequel. Watch right after I upload this video, Silksong gets release date. I don't know if I'll be more upset or happy. Also, to clarify again, I don't want to minimize Ender Lilies as a game comparing it to Hollow Knight. I know it may have come off that way, but the intent was to compare the game to Hollow Knight to promote its quality, and maybe even convince people to give it a shot. If I say it's similar to your favorite game, you may play it and may find something that you genuinely enjoy. That's it. That's the video. I do have another one planned and will hopefully get that done within 60 days and keep a decent pace. But, I don't want to say no promises, but no promises. In case you wanted to know, the video will be a retrospective type video based on one game. And that's all I feel like sharing as of now. Yeah, at least this time I know what I'm doing again, right? Anyway, this is the part that I begrudgingly have to say. Like, subscribe, do whatever you want to help the channel grow, comment, share, etc. But only if you like the video. If you found it a severe waste of your time, you can dislike it, hate share it, hate comment, and maybe even hate subscribe. I have been trophytroll, I wish you all the best, and until next time, later days.